Good morning. My name is Julie Gilman, and I'm a state representative, chair of the Exeter Select Board, and a member of the American Independence Museum's Board of Governors. It's my great honor to welcome you to the 28th Annual American Independence Festival. As a state representative, I traveled to the capital in Concord. The era we're celebrating today, Exeter was the capital of New Hampshire, so my commute would be much shorter. For all the planning and hard work, allow me to take a moment to recognize several people. Our festival coordinator, Victoria Sue, and all the museum staff. Our festival committee, also volunteers, our interns for the summer, our dedicated Board of Governors, Exeter Area Chamber of Commerce, Exeter Parks and Recreation, the Society of Cincinnati, the town of Exeter, and our tremendous group of volunteers you'll see today. Without this entire group, we would not have a festival. And I want to recognize some of the local businesses who have enabled us to hold such a spectacular festival this year. Our sponsors provide the funds that allow us to afford the reenactors, the interpreters, the artisans, and the musicians, all of whom make this day so rich and meaningful. The New Hampshire State Council of the Arts, who fund the Artisans Village on Folsom Tavern Lawn, Riverwoods, Ruffner Real Estate, and Exeter Hospital. We also hold much gratitude to Chinbert Builders, who provide the museum and today's festival to be free and open to active, retired military members, veterans, and their immediate families who attend. There's a full listing of our festival sponsors and in-kind supporters on the back of your program. We also thank you all to our museum members and donors in the crowd today. Please join me in thanking all of them. Imagine it is that July day in 1776. 2 weeks ago, the Continental Congress in Philadelphia voted to separate from the British. You debated at the tavern. Some of your neighbors are patriot, some are loyalists, and some are neutral. What will this mean for New Hampshire and the colonies? You've heard that a declaration was written in Philadelphia, a Declaration of Independence. You're waiting the document's arrival here in Exeter, along with eager townfolk, including John Taylor Gilman, a resident of the house directly behind me, when suddenly you hear the distant beating of horses' hooves on the road.
I like horses that are like
Good morning. I have in my hands a dispatch from the Continental Congress, which is currently located in Philadelphia. It's entitled A Declaration, and it's dated July 4th, 1776. I'd like to read it to you all now. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Liberty, give me anarchy!
That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall be most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused to assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he is utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from within and convulsions without. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high sea to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
At least they know the true ruler.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince, whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as a free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other things and acts which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
I'm the Executive Director of the American Independence Museum. I want to thank you all for coming out, and I want to thank you, Greg, for reading that declaration to us. Greg is a direct descendant of John Taylor Gilman, who originally read this declaration to the citizens of Exeter in 1776. Thank you, Greg. Of the broadside, what we call the Declaration of Independence, that arrived here in Exeter, we believe we have that original copy in our museum collection. That is on display today in the house behind me, the Ladd Gilman House. Today only. It's only available to see on Festival Day. So if you have not bought your admission to come visit the museum, please do so today. You can see the exact document that Greg's ancestor, John Taylor Gilman, read to the citizens of Exeter on that day in 1776.
My name is Stephen, and I'm a camp follower. My wife is a seamstress. What I do is I chop wood, where my wife makes and builds and creates our uniforms or our clothing. And this is my wife, Annette.
It's a great time. You should definitely try to make it here.